Just so everybody is super clear, the word private, so as was discussed earlier, the government is pushing to develop the private sector, the private industry, as opposed to state-owned. Private companies can be listed or unlisted. The panel we've just had there is on the listed market. We are focused now on the private market. So, as a starters for 10, and a question for everybody in the room, anybody who gets the answer right, I'll be very pleased. Panelists, do you want to come up while I'm doing this sort of chit-chat? How many listed companies are there in Vietnam? Eric, no. We'll go to someone else, and then we'll come back to you, Eric. Does anybody else want to have a go at that? 1,000. Very good. Do you want to tell everyone your name? So there are 1,600 listed companies in this country. Now, how many unlisted private companies are there? And do it to the rough 1,000. So 1,600 listed companies. How many unlisted companies? Anyone want to have a go? We'll start at 5,000. Do I hear any offers on 5,000? Anybody want to go higher than 5,000? So, how many? I can't hear what she's saying.
2 million.
2 million, no. 10,000, anybody a taker at 10,000? You're a taker at 10,000. 15,000 unlisted companies in this country. Now, I know Mr. Look earlier from BIDV was talking about a lot of them are SME, very small. And if anyone wants to grab us later, we're thinking about how we can invest into those companies as well. But the point I'm trying to make here is there are huge opportunities in the private market. And as Brooke talked to earlier, the way that we're set up within VinaCapital is not just to do the public markets, but also to look at the private markets. However, we don't just want you to hear from us today. So we've invited three other fund managers who, between them, cover the breadth and depth of the private equity market in this country. I'm also joined on stage by KV, who is the portfolio manager for VOF, which is our flagship fund that's been listed on the London Stock Exchange for 20 years. That fund has been making private equity investments, and within it is probably, in my opinion, the longest and strongest private equity track record in the country. So I thought it would be good also for KV to join us up here to share his thoughts on how he views the private equity market. So we have with us Minh from Warburg Pincus. We have Michael from AP Moller, and Genping from Vertex. So we've got three fund managers, international fund managers, who I've asked today to share their thoughts on unlocking the value in Vietnam's private markets and thinking about how the markets are developing and the risks that they face within those markets and how their strategies can manage to them. What I'm going to ask each of you now to do is to introduce yourselves, but as you do yourselves and your firm, perhaps within there you can talk a little bit about how to date you have managed to unlock value. Any examples you've got that you can share with the audience in terms of track record so far? Thank you. Minh, do you want to go first?
Sure.
So I've been in Vietnam for over a decade, and before that in the U.S. and in New York, investing across banking, hedge funds, private equity, but also spent time in Vietnam at Vingroup and Techcombank on the management team in operating companies. So Warburg is a pioneer of global growth investing. It's over almost 6 decades of investing and truly global private equity. In Asia alone, over $34 billion has invested in over 270 companies, and in Vietnam, over $2 billion over the last decade as the largest global private equity investor. And uniquely, WP as a private partnership allows us to focus on performance without the pressure of asset gathering. The model is built around alignment between our investors, our management partners, and ourselves, a perfectly aligned triangle to drive long-term returns. So we're business builders at heart. In partnership with management teams, we create value through earnings growth and not rely on leverage or multiple expansion. So that serves us well in Vietnam, where we have feet on the ground. We have local partners such as Vingroup when we invested in Vincom Retail, Becamex with BWID, and VinaCapital with Logis. Examples in Vietnam, Vincom Retail, when we invested in VinaCapital Retail was 3 malls, and by the time the IPO 5 years later, it was 75, and that was a very successal exit. The BW we built from 0 to almost 4 million square meters of GLA to date. Momo, we saw MAU increase 7-fold during our time, revenue and transactions over 40x, and went to profitability from loss-making. And Techcom Bank, I guess, it was a pre-IPO investment, almost 7x the book value during that time. So those are some examples.
Thank you. So, sorry, just on that. So a successful track record that you're comfortable with? Yeah. You're happy with how that's worked out? Okay. Michael?
Hi, so I'm here to represent AP Moller Capital. We're a mid-market, emerging market-focused investor in infrastructure. We are a relatively recent fund as APMC, but we're part of a group, AP Moller Group, which owns the Maersk shipping line and ports business, and itself has been active in Vietnam for around 100 years. So whereas we're relatively recent, that history does exist within this country. What we have invested so far in Vietnam is we have a renewables platform headquartered out of Singapore, which is called Verdant Energy, which is across the region, but is also very much focused on Vietnam. And then recently, this year, we have closed a transaction alongside VinaCapital, where we've invested in the air cargo space in North Vietnam. So really looking to capture on some of the manufacturing, electronics, key drivers that have been talked about this morning. And so those are sort of recent examples we've done in Vietnam. But probably a more common example would be a business from another country, which is more in line with the sort of private equity model that we seek to employ. So we're an infrastructure investor, but we're focused on the higher risk return end of the infrastructure spectrum. So really, logistics is a core part of that. In another country, we purchased 100% of an infrastructure, i.e. cold storage business from a food conglomerate. And we expanded the revenue base of this company by increasing its customers, its range of customers, whilst relying on the key customer as a sort of anchor. And then we're improving the margins of the business itself. So bringing in our operational expertise from across our wider group, so AP Moller Group and our network, to improve the performance of that business. We were able to do that in this case because we were able to take a majority and controlling stake in this business.
Thank you for that. And we work closely alongside AP Moller, as Michael was talking to. And I think the point there is also the brand name, the Maersk brand name, and the 100-year history is extremely valuable when we're talking to investment opportunities. People put a lot of onus on the skills and experience that the Maersk Group bring, ergo through you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Genping?
Yeah, so I focus on early stage. I realize everyone here, probably the ticket size is much bigger, 50 million or worse. Our ticket is 3 to 5 million, early stage, more like technology companies. So basically I work for Vertex Venture, which is Temasek, Singapore Temasek affiliate fund. Globally manage about 6.5 billion AUM, but I belong to the Vertex Southeast Asia India team, based out of Singapore, cover Vietnam. So far, we had 2 investments in this market. One is called Meteor, doing like MCN and live commerce. The other called Coolmate from Hanoi, doing consumer apparel brands. I think about both investments so far, we were very happy that when we generally feel opportunities in this market is highly undervalued, and especially that when we come in, we kind of like help them structure a strategy better and bring some like international resources. For Meteor, we brought in some Chinese partners with their products. For Coolmate, we strengthened the strategy and managed to expand the valuation by almost like 2.5 times within less than 1 year, and brought in international investors for their follow-on round. So yeah, so both we have done pretty much value and prove our value.
Okay, now we'll come back to that because I think Vietnam just doesn't exist in isolation, and one of the panel questions here that I want to sort of explore a little bit is how does Vietnam compare to other countries into which you invest, and then how how does the network work and how does it benefit from other countries? So maybe we'll come back to that. But KV, last but not least.
Thanks, Alex. I've been with VinaCapital for 15 years now, the last 12 with the VOF team. We've been executing this strategy since 2003. When Don founded this firm with the first $10 million, the first investment was into a private company. And I think that sets the DNA and the strategy for what we execute today. 23 years later, 200 plus deals, private equity investments and exits, we continue to execute that. And I think the name in our fund, how we execute the strategy lies in the name. We're an opportunity fund. And what that means is it allows us to look across the best opportunities, across the liquidity spectrum, across time periods, so that we can invest, generate the best returns, generate the best value, and then exit from our investments. And really, what does that mean? We leverage off, and I sort of look at the panelists here today, and I think one thing we don't stress enough, I think, is the VinaCapital platform and partnership. And it's not just folks within our own firm. So, when we execute investment, there's an investment we're executing at the moment, real time at the moment, so unfortunately we can't say the name or the sector, but we're reaching out, our team reaching out to other disciplines and other specialists within the firm. We're not operating in silos. Similarly, when I think about the folks on this platform, on the panel here, VinaCapital, whether with VOF, with other platforms, have invested alongside you. With Minh on the logistics and hospitality, with Michael on the logistics, and even with Genping, I believe, in some venture.
Yeah, fintech
company. So the key for us is that we are able to not just sit in silos and think about, executing, just investments in our own team. We can tap into others. So one example, as I said, is this new investment. Can't really say much about it. There's other examples. One of the things we say is we're long-term investors. We recently exited a hospital investment. If you think about the stock market, healthcare represents less than 2% of index weight, yet in our portfolio, we've held up to almost 10% of index weight. And that's primarily investing into private hospitals in the country. We've done it 4 times actually. We've done 2 exits. We've recently closed one, and that's with a platform where we went from 4 hospitals to 8 hospitals. It's in fact our second time investing with a sponsor. So, this idea that we're long-term investors, it sort of starts from that how we originated. In 2003, that private equity mindset sort of persists today in how we execute.
Okay, thank you. So I think, I hope everybody's got a feel here for what the strategies are that are represented on the panel here. What I'd like to now ask each of you is playing to the title of this panel, which is Unlocking Value. You've talked a little bit about some examples of what you have done. As you think about Vietnam 2.0 and the things that we've been talking about here today, the future of the country, how are you looking at that? What is the value? I mean, you mentioned you think there's good value here. What is the value that can be unlocked? As you're thinking forward, how are your strategies fit for purpose for what's going on in the country today?
Sure. I think it's been well covered that the attractive GDP and fastest growing GDP in Southeast Asia, attractive demographics, and a reform-minded, pro-business government that, and the massive infrastructure buildup in Vietnam is conducive to that type of investment. With that strong 7-8% annual growth, there are sectors such as education and healthcare where I think consumption is levered to rising income. Last year we invested in a chain of hospitals, and we're already seeing 20% plus return in that platform. There's still a very strong desire for growth equity in this market. Capital markets is still very geared towards secured lending. So entrepreneurs need not just funding, but brand network and the expertise that the Warburg team brings. And we partner, I think, with the entrepreneur, and because I think they care about their legacy continuation. It's especially important as we get to the point where a lot of these businesses are starting to see the next generation start to be involved in the business, and they may not have the experience and that the first generation had. So we have over 80 professionals globally in what we call the value creation team, and they get very deep into helping the companies grow, very much like Genping mentioned. Some of us actually get seconded into the company and help to unlock that, unlock the value and help the companies grow. And, so I think, in terms of, we still see a lot of opportunities there. We see sectors, especially geared towards consumption that are going to drive that.
So I think there's a couple of points I'd just like to build on there, if I may. One is around, we talked about the stock market earlier, and I think KV and Minh have referenced the fact that if you're buying the stock market here, it's hard to get education exposure. It's hard to get healthcare exposure. So the way you're thinking about is areas where you can't really get to at the moment, and coming through a fund starts to build that, and hopefully you will then be able to list companies on the stock exchange that will take it to that.
Sorry, just to build on that, and the other thing that we're having to do is it's a little bit, it's early, but not in the size that Genping is doing, but we are having to build up, much like what KV said about starting with a few hospitals. We invested their existing 4 hospitals, a few in the pipeline. M&A will expand that. So that type of BW from the start, and education, as you said, there really isn't a chain of schools today in Vietnam, so that'll have to be built.
There was another very good point that Minh made in there, and just so people are aware of it, I think I started my career in India, and the private equity market in India, when I first went there, it was locked tight. There wasn't much in terms of opportunity. And what changed in India was generational change. So the original families built conglomerates. The next generation come in and they go, oh, do we really need to have conglomerates? And then the families start to treat their businesses as assets, and then they start to trade them. And that's when the private equity market can also start to unlock value, which is then helping corporate India, in that case, corporate Vietnam today, develop. So I think, thank you for mentioning that. Michael, I can't remember what on earth the question was. Maybe you can bring us back to that.
Yeah, I'll try my best. I think, it's the position of Vietnam and unlocking value in Vietnam. I think we, as a fund, invest across this region, so Southeast Asia, we invest across Africa and India. And when you look at the investment jurisdictions we look at across those regions, obviously there's a lot of diversity and difference. But a personal view of mine is that Vietnam is very much, near or at the top of that list of places we want to invest. I think there is a whole of society focus on the goal of growth, and GDP being a key focus. Obviously, as an investor in infrastructure, logistics, ports, GDP is the key underlying driver to everything we look to invest in and try and capture from that perspective. And the need to make hay while the sun is shining over the next 10 years that we sort of heard about earlier is also sort of key for us from a fund perspective. So we really rank Vietnam at the top of the jurisdictions we look at. But of course, these are all complex jurisdictions. They all have different issues and unique, components. And key for us has been working with VinaCapital. We've partnered on the first investment we've made this year, which is in the north in Hanoi, and we're seeking to build that out into a wider platform within logistics, within ports. And having a partner who has done 400 deals across 20 plus years is really key for us.
On that point, Michael represents a very sector I mean, you're very general, you're very venture, but you're very sector focused.
Yeah.
So as you come into a market like this, well, how do you see the potential in logistics and the areas that you're looking at compared to other markets as well?
I mean, I think key for us is the business model of it as a country, as Vietnam. So it's really focused on that export-driven growth to succeed, which hasn't been significantly negatively affected. We've seen this year so far from the tariffs and all these geopolitical changes that are ongoing. The underlying position of Vietnam in terms of focus, population, cost, and expertise is really top when you compare it against other places that we could be looking to invest in.
Thank you. Genping, it's just we're on the question of the future of the country and how your strategy is fit for purpose and will unlock value as we move along.
Yeah. So I think the sector we focus the the stage we focus is early stage. Companies are exploring the more frontier concept of technology. And usually it's very, very hungry entrepreneurs are trying to figure out their ways that without much environment for them to learn. And the value we bring in as like Vertex have been kind of around for 38 years, investor in 1,000 companies around the world, that we bring in for the insights, that the resource for them to use, right? That founder generally is very, especially for the early stage founders, generally they are still trying to figure out, it's a very lonely journey. They don't really have many people to share the insights with them. And in both cases, we actually come in with our international kind of insights, help them kind of like shift the strategy a bit, and then help them to execute by bringing like talent and financing resources and anything else they need. And so that because of these insights and the system that help them kind of like create a new revenue stream and improve the multiples. So, but this is an ecosystem that we are still in the process of building. That the reality is currently there's a very vibrant angel and seed stage investment, and there's a little bit lack of like a Series A, B stage, and especially to bridge for international like big funds to come in with like 50 million, 100 million type of investment. And we do have very strong conviction on this thesis, and
Okay.
yeah.
KV, can I just dwell on that a little bit before I come to you? So maybe just a follow-up question for you. I think if anyone talks to Don when you're here, he will just go on about technology and innovation. In the video that we showed, you could see in there the emphasis on education and digital assets, the way semiconductors, etc., and the way we think it. And then if you listen to Mike, who hijacked his macro presentation to talk about AI, which is super important, and I thought he made some really, really good points there. As you think about this context, which we're trying to pick up on in this conference, how does that play with how you're thinking about the future here? And some of the comments we've made, is there substance to that, and do you believe in that?
Yeah, actually, I really loved Michael's presentation about the past and the future. So that you look at our current two investment, actually it's a little bit more domestic focus, consumption focus, and with Coolmate already getting into international market. They launched international sales on Amazon early this year, and within about 7-8 months, the international sales is already about 5% of their overall revenue. Then look forward, and we really believe in that. We already saw that Vietnam become an engineering hub for this region. And we really feel that there's a strong potential Vietnam become the innovation hub, especially along the AI directions for this region, or maybe for even part of the world. I think one of our biggest thesis in the next 5 years is really kind of figure out how to help the new generation of AI entrepreneurs to not just compete in Vietnam, it's really compete in the global front, because now AI is really a global landscape. No one can say, I only want to compete in my single country. So that's something that we hope that we can continue to bring value into Vietnam.
Okay, thank you. So KV, just to you, and again, the framework is you've probably got the longest experience in the country in terms of private equity and the evolution of the industry, and I've talked a little bit about the future, but I think maybe your comments would be helpful there in terms of how you as the lead manager, the fund manager for VOF, are thinking about how you move forward in an ever-changing environment.
Yeah, certainly. We've traditionally been significant minority investors. And unlike perhaps the benefit that Minh has, where he has that operational platform and operational partners to put into businesses, as significant minority investors, we tend to have been shying away from that idea, right? Partly because perhaps we didn't have here in Vietnam the resources, the skills, the people with the experience to put into businesses. That is changing. That is changing. Even within our own firm, you can see that there are many new faces who come from abroad with that institutional experience to drive forward. So within our own thinking, how we look at opportunities, we've now got to not only deal with the pace of change, and the pace of change is actually accelerating now. We've got to deal with how do we put operational experience into the investments, and then overlay that with how does technology enhance and catalyze many of these industries and businesses. So it is change. And traditionally, we've been growth equity, right? Back good management, back good companies, ride that very strong growth trajectory, and then focus on your exits. Time the cycle right. Right now, we're seeing strong buoyant markets. Use that potentially as an exit to IPO, or otherwise sell to other strategics or financials. But today, I think to drive value, and your question is to unlock value in Vietnam, you've really got to overlay that with really strong dedication to operational improvements.
Okay. I'm conscious we're sort of running to, so if anyone does have, if anyone does have comments or questions, though, put your hand up and we'll try and pick them up. Part of what we've talked about here, and some of you touched on it, but could you just share your thoughts, and you haven't got long on this, but in terms of just, I mean, Warburg Pincus is a global operation. The guys in New York, how are they thinking about Asia per se, but Vietnam, and how does Vietnam fit into the global thinking?
Sure. Actually, current CEO Jeff Pearlman, he actually was the first investor. He made the first investment for Warburg in Vietnam. But Warburg is a bit unique. It's an integrated global platform, and we operate as one firm. So as a single global partnership, that allows us to pull all the resources from all over the world to invest in wherever we invest. So I guess you look at the results. Vietnam, despite its size in the global economy, it's the number 4, number 5, depending on the year, largest target country for Warburg Pincus. So that says that we see a lot of opportunity here because each deal for Warburg competes with every other deal globally, as opposed to a geographically focused fund. So, and that allows us to pull the experience very early on. Despite the relative small size, we are able to pull professionals from India, from the U.S., et cetera, to come and help with the company. So we still see a lot of opportunities here.
Okay, and I think when Mr. Pearlman is sitting in Warburg Pincus, and maybe just playing to the previous panel where they were talking about what are the key risks in the public markets, I think for the benefit of people here who might be thinking, this is all great, but what are the risks that you guys are thinking about? And it's probably the way to finish now. So in terms of the key risks that you're thinking about and how your strategy can mitigate those,
Sure.
And if we take that, probably...
As investors, we're geared to take commercial risk. We know how to identify it, quantify it, and mitigate it. What is a little bit more difficult are regulatory and governmental risks, and and I think some of those things are being addressed by Resolution 68, whereas it's a landmark directive that's making private enterprises the key for growth. So in that, there's a lot of efficiency. There's clarifying of conflicting regulations and whatnot in the country, and I think that goes towards reducing some of the uncertainty of the risk that we see.
So do we owe a thank you to Mr. Zung for that? Is that right?
Yeah, and we're already seeing the increased efficiency, right? And in 2025, we've seen merging of the ministries, merging of provinces, reducing by half, and then elimination of one whole level, the district level of government. And I'm not sure I've seen that anywhere else in the world, and it's gone smoothly because no one's talking about it anymore, right? It's done.
Very well said, and thank you. Michael, again, key risks in the country and how you're thinking about those risks.
So I think, we've had this key macro risk of tariffs come through the year. What we've seen on the investment that we've made is in line with what was talked about earlier, in that it hasn't moved things a great deal because Vietnam's relative position is still very strong relative to the other sources of manufacturing. There's the regulatory side, but I think one key thing for us, And if you go back to the start when I talked about the example where we bought a cold storage business out of a conglomerate, that's not something we could do in Vietnam at the moment because of the quite extensive foreign ownership limitations across sectors. So as an infrastructure investor, we're really focused on hard assets like ports, logistics warehousing, air cargo warehousing, cold storage.
Just so you know, this was dealt with earlier, so it's all changing. Is that right?
Okay. So up until now, this has been a sort of key consideration for us because it's very difficult to implement the business plan, our plan for exit, et cetera, when we're a small minority in an investment. So, you know, there's the macro, there's the wider regulation, but as a specific issue, this has been one for us.
Thank you. Genping?
Yeah, so for us, generally the biggest risk is apparently execution risk with at such early stage. But for emerging countries, I think governance risk and early stage is also another big thing for us. That's why I generally tend to work with local fund partners in that perspective.
Okay, and we've got 30 seconds left on this panel. KV, would you like to finish this off with us, thinking a little bit about the risks as you think about them and how you're going to manage towards those?
I reckon we could squeeze in a few more extra minutes for Q&A, but certainly when we think through, it's about cycles, right? I mean, we're going through a period where the regulatory cycle is now moving into our favor. You know, we're seeing a lot of regulatory reform. So what has been a regulatory risk environment is now there's a lot more clarity. Policy risks, so I think within that monetary and fiscal policy, perhaps a second derivation of currency is interest rates. And so that's sort of playing a lot into our minds because if Vietnam does have to raise interest rates, what does then that play out into discount rates? What does that play out into earnings growth and businesses that have exposure to interest rate risks? So currency is one, but obviously what's the derivations beyond that? And then I think the final thing is the business risk. So again, we're seeing a cycle where we've come out of 5 years of very volatile earnings, thanks to COVID and various other things. We're entering a period, hopefully we get a lot more stability and predictability in earnings growth. So as investors, yeah, those risks come to play, but I think they're mitigated and the rewards that you get by acknowledging and managing those risks are certainly going to be very attractive.
Thank you. We have got time's up, and I think lunch is now. So does anyone have anything pressing they want to raise now? Otherwise, we can take questions. The gents here are staying for lunch. Eric? So would anyone like to ask a question, or should we let Eric take back control? Before you do, can you just join me in thanking our panelists, please?